get started here. So, this is going to be a little less formal than the other one in that I promised Mavis that we would have a very, very open conversation.
The registered patent attorney in me was...
It's not often that I have a lot of conversations with patent attorneys. Let's just start there. Okay, I'm flattered to be able to. I'm flattered to be able to. So
let's talk to non-patent attorneys.
What are you trying to say about patent attorneys, Mavis?
Hey, I'm one of them. I can't complain.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting is that you've had a lot of really wonderful experience in your career negotiating a lot of different scenarios, from TV shows to business negotiations and contracts, and you're even teaching, and you have this amazing background. I'm curious, you must have a process by which you operate and which you think about life when it comes to, getting the information you need. So I'm curious, how you approach that. I'll talk a little bit about how we approach it from a sales standpoint, but I'm very curious to see where those worlds coincide.
Well, it's funny because I think we talked a little bit earlier on, and my approach is definitely, I started to talk about this structure with 5 stages. And, we talked about preparation. We talked about, relationship building. And I think we're all on board with that. Yeah. And then I don't think I really got too deeply into what's called the information exchange. Yeah. And that's the core section. That's what, is important for sales or for anything. People have pointed this out in what they're saying alongside, which is really helpful to see. So for me, I think you've already heard a lot of what I believe in, which is questions. And so maybe I'll try to distill and refine that a little bit more. I think that starting off with, more open questions, broader questions, so that the other side has an opportunity to kind of tell you the story the way they want to. Mm-hmm. For me, for active listening, and also not, complete rule of thumb, but, it is, I think when you're listening more than you're talking, that's more of a learning conversation. And I think that word learning is really critical too. So, when I was talking about, if you don't ask, you don't get, if you don't inquire, you're never going to erase that information asymmetry. The used car salesman knows about the lemon car they're trying to sell you. You've got to kind of be skilled in asking questions with them. But I'm assuming most people aren't quite on that level.
Not everyone in here, I think, sells used cars. So that's where
I think very few. And I think just having a little fun with those who do.
So look, there's 15 people now in this room, including ourselves, which is awesome. So 13 participants. Right. That's actually a good chunk of the group here. So I just want to start off again by saying, hey, everybody. Top right, the way the breakouts work is they're interactive. All right, you're being challenged with objections. You want to make sure that you're listening. I'm here for Mavis. I love that people are here. More Mavis.
Hey, oh my God!
Game on. I love it. Mavis fan club is in the house.
The checks may not be in the mail, but there's other.
Yeah.
Payment systems.
Yeah, it's funny. They always miss my checks too, Mavis. We have that in common.
Don't worry, Bryan. You're next.
But let's open it up to the group here. We're here to answer your questions and help empower your conversations. So all you have to do is click the join or the participate or whatever the damn button is in the top right corner, and we'll field your question live right on screen with us. Your camera will come on, your voice will come on, life will be good. I'll go down the road. So a little bit about active listening, and while we're waiting for people to come on and ask us questions, I really believe that a good negotiation, Mavis, is about understanding everything that's going on in the shoes of your counterpart. So
absolutely.
I think it's interesting is that the more sellers I work with and coach on a daily basis, the more I see we get so caught up in our product and our features and our benefits, and what we think the other person needs. And it's the number one problem, I think, in sales today is that we're not thinking enough about the customer themselves about their problems, about their self-generated needs, and telling us what they need so that we can help map our product in. And I think that that's where what you're saying about the ears and listening, it's like God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth. Hello, right? Like that.
There you go. There you go.
The
You're a good numbers guy.
Yeah.
No joke. No joke. No. I mean, you know, like when you set it up like this, I'm just going to hit it. Yeah, preach.
Go.
With you, Caroline, preach. I mean, this is the thing. And I'm gonna talk about a book that everybody who's read it, I mean, they just love this book. And it's, despite a name that may not sound, you know, like super happy, but it is really important. It's Difficult Conversations. That's the title of this book. Just Google it. It is a book that talks about just what you've mentioned, Bryan, which is, you know, it's not all about me. You know, it's not just my perspective. You know, I'm coming to this and I'm talking to this person on this, and how am I going to sell to this person? Well, you know, we've talked about a lot of other different things, you know, the relationship building. How will I develop a good business relationship so that we can keep on, you know, we can keep working together, you know, doing future deals, doing more deals.
Yep.
And it really is going to come from me really completely understanding that other person. It's just like Jason's point earlier, like we're talking about the interview. When you think of, as Marcus did, what the interviewer wants, you're going to be more likely to be able to give the interviewer what he or she wants. When you come out of yourself, and so this book talks about, you know, just everybody comes here with a certain frame. Everybody comes here with a certain perspective. So the first thing, and it's tough, you know, we're human beings, is to understand you have a perspective, like you have your own point of view. So once you admit that and realize that, then you can kind of start talking about other people and thinking about other people. And then you can generate those great questions in your preparation so you can ask them and you can find out more about them. I mean, it's actually like, it's a joy, right? If you're a salesperson, you're talking to people all the time. You're reaching out, you're connecting with people. You get to learn from them. You get to know them. I mean, it's, you know, there's so many good aspects of it. So, you know, just really, you know, use your curiosity. So,
yeah.
So Sam wants to empathy loop. So I'll do empathy looping too.
Hold on. Before we go to empathy looping, we have to go to Jason, who I think has a really good question. So his question is how to be assertive and yet respectful in a negotiation. So, okay, I'm going to dive here first. All right. I have a lot of good thoughts on this one. All right.
I'm sure you do. I want to hear it.
Jason, so I think respectful, when I think of respectful, the biggest sign of respect that you could ever have is to put in sales is to put your customer before yourself, is to showcase that they're the most important thing to you. So first and foremost, the sign of respect is getting them to share, is to ask them to share, is to show that you're on their side. And we don't show that we're on their side by giving what I call rather, we don't show that we're on their side by doing fake empathy. Fake empathy is what I call passion or sympathy. Empathy is actually just simply understanding what's happening in somebody else's shoes. And the only way we can do that is by getting that information and by asking the questions that matter to them. So they're open-ended questions. They're not close-ended. They ask a lot of hows and whats, never why, because why is very accusatory and makes someone go defensive. And we get them to really speak what's on their mind. We ask a lot of what else or tell me more about. Once we have that open conversation and dialogue happening, one thing that happens is that we've built a lot of rapport, which is something that Mavis and I are doing famously right now. Right? We build a lot of rapport.
Keep it going.
Keep it going. But when you build a lot of rapport and at the same time extract a lot of fact, to your point of being assertive doesn't mean force. Assertive doesn't mean holding someone's arm behind their back and twisting it. Assertive means that you're taking the information you've gathered and positioning it back towards that person only in the frame of mind of how you're going to help them. And I think that that's in essence on a negotiation. It's like if you've negotiated using their words and their pains and the impacts of their business, then you've never actually had to really twist someone's arm in a negotiation. You actually should be helping them make a purchase.
Yeah, no, and again, I find myself, like echoing to the as loudly and happily and cheerfully as possible. Respect is real interest, and I think that sincerity piece, it comes through. So one of the ways you can really convey it beyond the words you use, which is why sometimes, Bryan's right. Sometimes, for example, and I'm going to go through the empathy looping for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes people empathy loop, and it's a little, honey, your hair looks great.
Yeah. It's fake.
That's my daughter.
Oh, yeah.
But so, and I've sympathy, everything for my kids. But no, so the thing is that, like you really don't want to just sort of go formulaically through, oh, so this means that you are that, like you have to develop your own authentic way of empathy looping, of asking questions. But again, like I said, it really does start with you. That's one of the things that comes out from this book, Difficult Conversation. But in general, as Bryan said, like when you're really, like you're truly curious, you're going to ask the right questions, and you're going to,
Yep.
you're going to be following up in the right way. So
Sam talks about Never Split the Difference. Mavis, have you read the book? Are you familiar with it?
Let me see. Never Split the Difference.
Chris Voss.
Yeah, I know you were talking about him. No, I'm not as he's not as, but I see that book creeping.
You gotta read. You gotta read this book. You gotta read it. I swear I didn't have it at my desk for this. I swear that I was using it earlier. I swear I was teaching a course in this earlier. It's really funny. Yeah.
See, I have another one. I don't have difficult conversations, but we all have.
Yeah, there you go. Game on. All right. So same thing.
So many grades.
Yeah,
so many great.
So many good books. So Sam, I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. I don't know how familiar you are with his process and his methodology, how much you've studied, but you bring up, whether you've been really familiar with it or not, you bring up a really good point. And that is, talk about a little bit of what's behind the offer and the question, and asking what's behind the offer and the question, and repeating questions. Okay, so let's just go backwards a little bit. There's a couple of skills that I think are really, really interesting in a negotiation, right? One of them is Chris would call mirroring, and the other would call labeling. So something that we can do in a conversation is I can easily take 2 or 3 words of a sentence and just repeat it back in a really curious and inquisitive way. And in doing so, I've never really had to come up with a question. I just asked 3 little words, put 3 little words that the person just said to me into a question, and they'll elaborate naturally. And that's called mirroring. And all I'm doing is mirroring, and what I'm doing is they're gonna feel like they need to justify more of what they're saying, and they'll share more information. I do it all the time when I teach. I think it's a really wonderful tactic. The other thing that you can use in labeling is you can label accurately or inaccurately, your choice, what from a third party standpoint something sounds like. So never, well, you said, but it seems like, and then I can say whatever the heck it is that I want to say because it's third party objective. And then the person, if it's accurate, will go, yeah, I think that's right, and continue. Or they will say, no, that's not what I meant, and clarify. And what you do is you're always getting more information. Chris and his team, through their ongoing training of mirroring and labeling, have claimed that they can go to a dinner party and never really share any of your own thoughts, and just spend mirroring and labeling, and someone will just keep talking, and you'll get a lot of information that night. But it's really an interesting point. Cool. To see, Scott.
I wanted to kind of follow up on saying, Bryan, and talk about what I was describing as empathy looping.
Yeah. He talks about this too, so that's good. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and so I, again, to Sam's point, so many different, these different points, is that, of course, you ask the question, right? The person responds. And you can respond, you can show your understanding by summarizing, paraphrasing. We're talking about the paraphrasing, right? When you take a few words from it. And it can refer to their interests, which is a very important word, and maybe, like not just as the regular English word, but your real interest, your underlying interest, as opposed to a position that was taken, because those are different things. It could be feelings, it could be facts, whatever. I'm a major fan of trying to demonstrate in empathy looping that you understand by trying to summarize, which I think you were alluding to and we're getting to. Because when you summarize as opposed to just kind of like repeating, which is also important and can be very helpful because you may still have some questions, but when you're summarizing, it's often a way to move the conversation along. So in other words, we all know you've got the business deal with the numbers, different factors, and you want to make sure that you get all. So if you summarize it, a few things can happen. One is, like you were saying before, you're going to be corrected. And that's fantastic. Always better to be corrected during the negotiations than to receive an email confirming something that, like you don't remember, you didn't think, right? Confirming. So, hey, if you're wrong, that's okay. Then that's the whole point. Let's fix it. But you also, by summarizing, are putting it together in a package and hopefully, like I said, moving the process along. So, I'm a big fan of summarizing. I always say, and again, checking that, and again, the simple question, is that right? Am I right in what I'm saying? Like, does that sound right to you? Any kind of variation on that theme is fantastic.
Yeah.
I see a
no,
number.
I'm taking no. I'm just popping into the chat here because there's a couple of questions popping up. Scott, just to your point, if done poorly, it could be dangerous. Yeah, I agree. It's something about tone is really important, right? Like we can ask a question. I could think of a question like, what made you think of that, right? Or I could say, what made you think of that, right? And tone is literally.
Takes either up or down, right?
Exactly. My tone is going to match what my question is, and so part of tone matching and is really important towards having really great outcomes in your conversations. Katie, I really want you to join our combo here because I think that you have a really great question.
I think that's a partial answer to what Katie's asking about the why questions.
Yeah.
And in fact, I know we've talked about real life situations. And so I think I've got to kind of share one because I don't know if Katie's thinking of a specific situation, but I know, I'm a pretty friendly person. You might be able to figure out, so I'm, with my kids, and you've kind of heard me interacting with at least my daughter, and we're waiting online to go to, to see like summer stage in the city. It's great. And I meet this woman and of course we strike up a conversation and we both realize that we teach negotiations, which, is like, what are the chances, blah, blah, blah. And so we became friendly. And of course, we exchanged numbers. So we ended up going to other summer stage events. It was great. I'd bring my kids. So I was talking to her about something. And while she seemed like a very nice person, she flips and starts trying to empathy loop with me in a way that was, unfortunately, I hate to admit, like it was a little bit more of this kind of artificial feeling. And meanwhile, they always say like never try to, to fool someone who does this themselves. I'm trying to, not say it. But so when she's saying it to me, it was so stiff and artificial. And I don't think I would have even done it that way. And I was kind of like, really? Are you joking? So I think that's one of the reasons why I haven't had that experience.
It becomes a very forced conversation.
Very forced. And so when you ask why, it really is important for you maybe to even go a little bit overboard in nonverbal and tone to not make it sound confrontational or even judgmental, because judgmental, that can really happen with empathy looping because you're asking these questions and it can sort of seem like, okay, I'm sitting up on this perch looking down at you, and you don't want it to sound like that. You want it to be like, gee, wait, so how did you do this? I'm really curious, like you could say, I'm really curious, and again, if you saying I'm really curious sounds strange to you, don't do it. right? Because, you know, you got to do what seems natural. But
well, I mean, so, and just to jump in, Mavis, like Katie, on the question why,
mhm.
the reason why we don't say why, from at least my perspective, is that if I was to ask you why, one of the things that you're going to realize is that it actually is, it goes back to your parents when you were a kid. When you did something wrong, right? Your mom looked at you and said, "Why did you do that?" And it ingrained in you this idea that you've done something wrong. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Maybe it wasn't your mom, but there was definitely a parental figure in your life that probably asked you that on several occasions in your young life. I know I ask my children that on a daily basis. And so one thing is that the why then became inflicted in your brain as a negative connotation. So now when you have a conversation with someone says, "Why did you do that?" Like, or even why? Like, it becomes a judgmental, I need to defend myself. What you can use instead as an alternate technique is just replace your whys with whats. Now you can say, what made you do that? If you notice, it feels different right out the gate. What made you do that? What made you think of that? What was the reason behind that decision? That becomes very much an almost third-party objective way of asking a question, so that it doesn't ever feel like you're being accused of anything. So it's an easy easy tool. Jason,
I want to get to Jason too, but
yeah.
I just want to get another approach. So when I was talking about being up on the perch, seeming judgmental, another way to deal with, you know, like you said, not being the parent and the authority figure, because that's what we're talking about, right? Like, to make it seem as though you have more power, you're the supreme one, you know, asking these questions why. You can also say, I don't, could you explain this to me? Or I don't understand, or, you know, there are ways to really connect. And if, and sometimes if you're asking someone to explain it to you, can you help me to understand it? Again, tone's important and how you do it, but now the person is helping you, and it's not a matter of, you know, so why would you do something? You know, it's not that sort of judgmental. So hopefully those are some approaches, you know.
I was trying to get Jason to join us here, simply because I think there's a layered question, you know, question of internal objections. I don't think we ever really cover this much on webinars, but it's a really good question, and there's a couple different ways in which he might be asking it, which is the reason why I'm hoping he might be able to join us. Jason, if you were able to just click the share audio and video button, I'll admit you to the convo, and we can dive into it. But I guess we can, in the meantime, start with it. Internal objections. The first thing that comes to mind in this question is, like, when I'm conflicted about whether or not I want to do something for my own outcome or for somebody else's outcome. And I don't know if that's really what you mean by that, Jason. If you're still there, Jason. But let's go, Mavis. I mean, how do you...
I'm happy to jump into that, because so for me as a lawyer, so I'm gonna approach both of them. One, the principle. So if I'm handling something for myself and I have you know, some issues or some feelings about it, I'm going to, let's say, I mean, this is a very easy example because, you know, you have all the power in the world over it, or at least we certainly did pre-COVID. Let's put, like, just, you know, put our pre-COVID hats on. I mean, if I were in, you know, some establishment and I'm buying something, so of course I'm just the customer, and, you know, caveat, you know, like I would be much more likely to, if it's really egregious, I feel like, you know, DW's approach, except I wouldn't probably turn back around if I really feel it's egregious. You know, I would walk out. I would, you know, I would speak with my money, or lack of, you know, using my credit card. That's one way I would deal with it for myself. But if it's a situation where I'm the agent, I'm somebody's lawyer, I'm working at a company, I'm going to try to come up with a simplistic approach where we have someone on the other side who's acting, you know, insane, right? And they're really, really difficult to deal with. In fact, okay, this is another great real world example. And I can tell you, this one goes back to, we all now, it's hard to imagine that there was a world before reality TV, but I'm going to confess that I actually was working and an adult when it existed. So early on with the first season of Survivor at CBS, I was contacted by this agent, and he was, unfortunately, like sort of this bad stereotype of an agent. Richard Hatch, I don't know if that name means anything to any of you, but he was like the first big winner, and he was going to be on our early show, our morning programming. And, for those of you, I just got to say that, in TV, you get paid hardly anything for, early show, morning, appearances compared to certainly, like late night or, one of those types of shows. So I was the attorney who was dealing with this agent, offering what I was told to offer. It wasn't like I just made this number up, but I had a range. My range was totally unacceptable to this agent, and he didn't have honestly the decency to just respond and say, hey, can't you do better or whatever. He was one of these, I'm going to yell, I'm going to scream, I'm going to try to abuse you. And at this point, I was kind of mid-career. I had been practicing for a while, so I wasn't a fresh green. I had just graduated from law school, so I wasn't really interested in letting somebody yell at me because he just felt like he wanted to blow off steam, and it was not productive. Unfortunately, we have these. You have those hard negotiations. So he kept yelling. And well, this is ridiculous. I said, look, this is what I've been given. He goes, well, you better, I said, well, he said, well, you're going to have to do this. And I have to admit, I really did say this. I said, no, you're going to have to stop yelling at me. And when I said that, he goes, oh, well, then I'll just have to call your boss or call the I said, oh, well, I guess that's what you're going to have to do. Now,
I think we've all been to a point where in a sale, someone's yelled at us also. So that's a good point.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, this happens. And I unfortunately have enough yeller screamer stories, but him, I knew what he was going to do. He wasn't joking. He was going to contact the head guy. Actually, I hadn't even been there at CBS that long at that point, but look, survival of the fittest. As soon as he hung up on me, I called up the executive producer because I knew he was going straight to the top. And thankfully, I got to him first. And I said, look, I was being reasonable. This guy doesn't like the numbers. What can, and again, this is that issue of, you can't go on your own anymore because he's made it clear to me he's not interested in dealing with me, and he's going to probably badmouth me and say, whatever he's going to say. So you have to get your case in there before he does.
I agree, Scott. Bullying is not negotiating. I think Mavis, that's a really nice summarization of that. It isn't, right? And defending yourself and finding that way to do it in a smart and proactive way is super important.
Sort of objection handling, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, well, Jason, I guess from my point here, and then Maturza, I'm coming to you. So when you're feeling stuck on how to best solve a problem, from my standpoint on the sales side, I want you to put your customer into your brain and remember this phrase: do what's right by the customer because it's the right thing to do. Start there, okay? If you do that and you're a customer-centric individual, you will always make the right decision. Start there. That's going to help you make that decision. That's going to help you best solve your internal conflict. I remember being a sales rep and having the internal conflict of I know I could get more from this customer, but I also know that they maybe don't have it. So maybe it's better if I just, do what's right by the customer. It's the right thing to do. Scott, something, I think you're right there, right?
That's a good point.
There are two customers, is that you have the customer and your company. I completely agree, right? You have the two customers. The thing is that they're not mutually exclusive though. Right. So your company is,
although it can be, is his point that it's in conflict sometimes?
I think so. And I think that the other thing though is that but your company should be in the position of helping people and putting people above the company. If it's not, come see me at Aircall. We're hiring at some point, and we'll probably take you.
I really have enjoyed working with. They're great people.
Yeah. No, I think, but that's where I would start. Is like, try to keep in mind that your company and its mission is going to be aligned with its customers. And if anyone argues on that, tell them to go read the mission. And I think that'll frame that up.
Although I wonder, I mean, I don't want to put him, okay, not conflict if done right. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, what happens sometimes is that you play different roles with different people, and you have to really be clear about what the role is that you're in when you're dealing with someone. I mean, I know for us as lawyers, sometimes I was negotiating deals with people to re-up their agreement. I was working for the company and not for them, and they were some of my best friends who I did licensing deals. If I'm doing if I'm licensing footage for you, hey, on the same team, no problem. But you know what? And this was tough because I mean, these are people I was.
That's a tough position just to be in general. Like, as an attorney, that's a tough position. You are representing the company. That's your job. You got to represent the business.
That's very clear. And there are ethics and other issues that get involved that we may not even need to get into.
Right.
But I just have to say that to this point, if this is at all helpful, Scott, is that I really would start and make it really clear. I'm like, you know what? You got to understand, I'm working for the company. But again, coming back to like the way you negotiate, I still said, okay, I'm the company's lawyer, but we're going to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think kind of things, your integrity. Again, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I believe it, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. Reputational value, you take that with you from job to job to job. And really for your whole life. And you know what? You never know who you're going to meet that's going to get you your next job. It could be somebody who's another parent on the soccer, when, your kids are playing soccer. You have to be, I've mentioned these words before, but you have to be authentic.
Yep.
You have to be sincere. You have to do what you really, like, you have to be yourself.
Be true to yourself.
Yeah, be really true. So that's a big part of negotiation. Negotiation is like this whole
it's
self-improvement,
giant nut. Jason, I have time for one more question. If you want to come and go for it, just type it in the box there and we can rock it for sure. I know
we have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Just one sec. I can wait that sec. In the meantime, I invite you, if you're on this panel in this session, guys, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and ask any private question that you might have or that you were hoping to have answered. I'm more than happy to jump in and get in the weeds. It's like my secret privilege that I love. Like, I wait up at night. It's like my wife's like, "What are you doing on the phone?" I'm like, "Shh."
and I'll say the same thing, because as you can tell, like, we want to share so much and it's just not enough time, but I'm more than happy to reply on LinkedIn and
absolutely. Jason, I am waiting with bated breath right now. I know. I'll put something else out there too for anybody that's out there asking questions that you're going to have difficult questions to ask. You can frame any difficult question with just this upcoming message of just out of curiosity. And if you started any question with just out of curiosity, you can get away with pretty much anything. It's actually interesting. It's like, think of the world's worst question you could possibly ask. It's like, and then put just out of curiosity in front of it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, that works. I can get away with that. All right, Jason, we have one last question. We have a minute here. In my last job, not sales, I had to work with some really arrogant and stupid people who never took responsibility. I had to explain things over and over again to them. Have you worked with people like that? Okay, so here's what I'm going to put out, and I think I know where you're going.
I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer.
Mavis,
I'm sorry. I should
have to represent the company. All right, so here's okay. So I'll frame this up. If you haven't read it yet, Jason, go read Extreme Ownership. All right, the book is Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willenick, I think is how you say the last name. Go read this book. I think I fell victim to a lot of well, that was a dumb question throughout my entire career, and I like put it in my brain. All right, what's hard is that you are, Jason, allowed to point a finger and make that accusation as long as you point the finger at yourself first. Okay? You're allowed to point a finger anywhere you want as long as the first finger you point is right here. And the reason why is because you need to take extreme ownership of everything that happens in your day and your job. Now, I get that some things are outside of your control. And I get that there's going to be frustrating people that enter your life. That's going to happen across the way. But go read Extreme Ownership. It's going to frame up how you deal with difficult situations like that and exactly where to go.
I know we're right on the edge, but I wanted to, again, go back to the points that were made earlier during the panel and just say, if you're thinking this about this person, other people are thinking that about that person, and you can't go wrong by getting advice from maybe some of your colleagues who have dealt with this person successfully. Because, you know, like there are always at least a couple of people who are in good with that one person nobody likes. And you're like, how is that possible? And talk to them because they've got an idea. And like we said, no salesperson is an island, no person is an island.
I'm getting pinged. We are getting the hook. Everybody listen. I'm sorry, Mavis, to cut you short. All right, everybody listen. Thank you so much for joining this breakout. Please hit the sessions button. Join the main panel. We're going to have final thoughts. All right. State of sales, final thoughts. And we're going to get you on the road here. All right. Sound good? Good, great, terrific. See you guys there. Sounds good. Let's do it.